Everything changed. It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday evening, the kind where I could unwind after a long week of deadlines and meetings. My name is David Jennings, and at 40 years old, I had what many people would consider a perfect life. A successful career as a creative director at a top marketing agency in Chicago, a beautiful home in a prestigious neighborhood, and a lovely daughter named Emma, who had just turned 12. My marriage to Sarah, my wife of 15 years, seemed rock solid. At least, that's what I believed. Sarah had always been the ambitious one, a dedicated professional. She worked as a public relations manager at a leading tech company, which often required her to attend networking events and corporate functions. I supported her career without question. After all, we had built this life together, and I was proud of what she had accomplished. We had always managed a balance between work and family. Dinner together when we could, shared responsibilities with Emma, and an understanding that we both needed space to pursue our individual passions. That evening, Sarah mentioned over breakfast that she would be attending a gala at a luxury hotel in the city. "It's a company event," she told me, casually checking her phone. "Just a few clients, nothing major. I might be late, so don't wait up." I nodded and shrugged it off. These kinds of events were common in her industry, and I had no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary. With Emma staying at a friend's house for the night, I had the rare opportunity to enjoy some quiet time alone. I figured I'd catch up on work or watch a documentary I had been meaning to finish. The evening went as expected until I received a text around 8 p.m. It was from Ethan, an old colleague who had recently joined our agency. "Hey, David, we're at the Skyline tonight. The place is packed. You should come join us if you're free." I hadn't been out in a while, and the idea of mingling while grabbing a drink seemed like a good opportunity to unwind. I texted back, "Sounds great. I'll be there around 10. The Skyline was a trendy new hotspot in the city, a club that had quickly gained popularity among the professional crowd. I arrived just after 10:30, the club alive with energy. The bass of the music vibrated through the floors, and the lights danced around the sleek, modern interior. Ethan had secured a VIP section, which gave us a perfect view of the entire space. As I made my way to the table, I noticed the lively atmosphere, people laughing, talking, and dancing. But it wasn't the crowd that caught my attention. It was Sarah. There she was, standing on the dance floor, wearing a black dress that I didn't recognize. Her hair was styled differently than when she had left that morning, and she was laughing as she danced with a man I had never seen before. My heart sank. At first, I assumed it was just a casual encounter, someone she worked with or a colleague from the gala. But as I stood there, watching, something didn't sit right. The way they were dancing, how close they were, the way his hands lingered on her waist, moving lower with each passing moment. It was not casual. And then, she didn't pull away. Instead, she pressed herself closer to him, her arms slipping around his neck, her body language completely open. The world around me seemed to slow down as I watched, a tightness growing in my chest. This wasn't just a friendly gesture. It was intimate, deliberate, and as much as I wanted to tell myself I was overreacting, the truth was unmistakable. I didn't know what to do. My feet were glued to the floor, but my mind raced. I had been married to Sarah for 15 years, and this wasn't how I thought she would behave. Not after everything we had been through, everything we had built together. As I stood there, fighting the overwhelming surge of emotions threatening to break through, I made a decision. I was done watching from the sidelines. I walked toward the dance floor, my eyes fixed on Sarah and her dance partner, who seemed so oblivious to my presence. It took a few moments before Sarah finally noticed me standing beside them. Her eyes widened in surprise, then confusion, and then annoyance. "David, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice raised slightly to be heard over the music. The question felt absurd to me. What was I doing here? I could ask you the same thing. I replied, my voice calm despite the storm inside me. "This doesn't look like a work event." The man, who had been so comfortable with Sarah, straightened up, clearly unbothered. "A friend of yours, Becca?" he asked with a grin, as if there was nothing unusual about the situation. "This is my husband, David," Sarah said, her tone defensive, almost as if she was explaining something trivial. David, this is Jack. He's from the company's tech team. We're just having fun. Jack extended his hand casually, but I ignored it. Interesting, I said, raising an eyebrow. She never mentioned you. Sarah's face hardened as she quickly tried to steer the conversation. David, don't start, she snapped. We're just dancing. Everyone here is from work or clients. It's not a big deal. I could feel the eyes of people around us, their attention shifting from the dance floor to the unfolding scene. I glanced around, recognizing some faces from corporate events I'd attended with Sarah. People were whispering behind cocktails, barely concealing their interest. Do you want to join us? Sarah offered, trying to cover up the tension, though her voice lacked the enthusiasm it should have had. There are some people you should meet. Networking opportunities. I shook my head. I think I've seen enough networking for one night. I turned and walked away before she could say another word. As I made my way back to the VIP section, my mind raced. The world around me seemed to fade as I tried to process what had just happened. I sat down beside Ethan, who raised an eyebrow at my appearance. You okay, man? He asked, his voice low, sensing something was off. Yeah, I replied, though I didn't feel okay. I just saw something I wish I hadn't. Ethan didn't press me further. Instead, he introduced me to some clients, and I mechanically went through the motions of small talk, my mind still fixated on the scene I had just witnessed. Sarah continued dancing with Jack, though now with noticeable restraint. Every now and then, she glanced up at me, but I couldn't read her expression from across the room. Around midnight, Sarah finally gathered her purse and walked toward the exit with some colleagues, pointedly not looking in my direction. I stayed at the club for a while longer, trying to appear normal, but nothing felt normal. I left around 1 a.m., my mind swirling with questions, confusion, and hurt. When I arrived home, it was quiet. The lights were off, and Sarah's car was parked outside, but the house felt empty. I found her in the guest room, seemingly asleep, but the tension in her posture told me everything I needed to know. I didn't disturb her. Instead, I showered and climbed into our bed alone, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the events of the evening over and over again, but sleep never came. The confrontation I had been expecting never materialized. The next morning, Sarah was up early, dressed for a run. We need to talk, she said briskly as she grabbed her shoes. I nodded. Later, I replied quietly, but I knew. I had already seen enough. I was done pretending everything was fine. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the kitchen as I sipped my coffee. Sarah hadn't been home long when she came in, already dressed in her running gear. She didn't meet my eyes, her movements quick and deliberate, as if avoiding the confrontation that I knew was coming. We need to talk about last night, she said, not looking at me as she laced up her sneakers. I nodded, my grip tightening around my coffee mug. Yes, we do. I had been preparing for this moment, mentally rehearsing what I needed to say. The events of the previous night were still too raw, too fresh in my mind. The betrayal, the public display of affection, the way she seemed completely unbothered by it all. She grabbed her water bottle from the counter and walked toward the door. I'm going for a run. We can talk when I get back. I just need some air. I watched her go, the door closing behind her with a soft click. My stomach churned as I stood in the quiet kitchen, the weight of the silence between us hanging in the air. I tried to focus on something else, anything, but the images of Sarah dancing with Jack, her body pressed against his, were seared into my mind. I knew she was avoiding me. She wasn't ready to face what had happened, or worse, she was trying to make me doubt what I had seen. My mind flashed back to her defensive tone, her attempts to downplay everything. She had even blamed me, saying I was controlling, accusing me of not letting her have fun. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I had to remain calm. I had to stay focused. Emma would need me, and I wouldn't let this destroy her. An hour passed before Sarah returned, the front door creaking open as she entered the house. I was sitting at the dining table, my phone in hand, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. I could hear the soft shuffle of her sneakers against the floor, the sound of her breathing, just a little too heavy for someone who had just gone for a run. She walked into the kitchen, her eyes meeting mine for the first time that morning. There was no apology in her expression, no remorse. just a tense line around her mouth, as if she were bracing for something. "David," she began, her voice softer now, but with an edge of uncertainty. "I know you saw what happened last night, and I need you to understand it wasn't what it looked like." I stood up slowly, setting my coffee down. The urge to say something cutting was strong, but I resisted. I had to stay in control. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady, "I saw exactly what it looked like. I watched you dancing with him. Your body language couldn't be clearer. You were letting him touch you in ways that go beyond friendly. And you didn't pull away." She flinched at my words, but quickly regained her composure, taking a step back from me. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just dancing. People do that at clubs all the time." I shook my head, the frustration rising in me again. "That wasn't dancing. That was flirting. And it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a miscommunication. This was a conscious choice, Sarah. You chose to let him touch you, to let him get that close. You didn't even seem uncomfortable. You didn't even care that I was there." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. I saw the guilt, buried deep, but still there. "David," she said, trying to soften her tone, but it only made things worse. "It wasn't like that. I didn't mean for things to get out of hand." I took a deep breath, letting the silence settle between us. The air felt thick with everything that had been left unsaid. "Then what was it, Sarah? What was it that made you think it was okay to behave that way? Was I not enough? Did I not make you feel valued anymore?" She hesitated, looking away for just a moment. "You know how busy I've been. The stress of work, the pressure of everything. It just felt good to let go for once. But that doesn't mean I don't love you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was still trying to justify it, still try to minimize what had happened. She was making it about her stress, her need for relief, but she wasn't addressing the real issue. She had crossed the line, and she wasn't taking responsibility for it. "You don't get to do that, Sarah," I said, my voice firmer now. "You don't get to justify your actions by making me the villain. I didn't force you to dance with him. I didn't force you to let him touch you. You made those choices, and now you have to face the consequences." Her face twisted in frustration, her hands gripping the edge of the counter as if she could hold herself together that way. "I didn't think you'd react like this. I didn't think it would be this big of a deal." I took a step closer, my voice quiet but unwavering. "Of course it's a big deal, Sarah. You betray my trust. You've broken something that's been built over years. And instead of owning it, you're deflecting, blaming me, and minimizing everything. That's not how this works." I could see her fighting against the truth, but there was no escaping it. The night before, everything had changed. Our marriage, everything I thought was solid, had cracked in an instant. I couldn't pretend it was just a mistake. "I don't know how to fix this, David," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I don't know what to do to make things right." I didn't answer right away. The silence between us grew thick again, and I could hear the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the background. It seemed so small, so insignificant compared to the mess we were facing. "You have to be honest, Sarah," I said softly, "with yourself and with me. You can't hide from what you've done. You can't make it go away by pretending it didn't happen. Until you acknowledge that, I don't know how we move forward." She looked up at me, her face a mix of anger and guilt, but it was clear she wasn't ready to face the truth. "You're being unfair," she said, her voice rising again. "I made a mistake. That's all." I shook my head. "It's not just a mistake, Sarah. It's everything that came after. The excuses, the manipulation, the way you try to make me feel like I was wrong for being hurt. That's what's really broken here." I turned and walked toward the living room, leaving her standing there, unsure of what to say next. She hadn't understood. Not yet. And in that moment, I knew this was only the beginning of what would be a long and painful journey. The following days were a blur of quiet tension. Sarah and I shared the same space, but it felt like we were living in parallel worlds. We spoke only when necessary, our conversations terse and lacking the warmth they once held. The house, which had been our home for years, now felt like a stranger's house, a place where two people who once cared for each other were merely coexisting under the same roof, both trapped in the fallout of a single, unacknowledged mistake. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened at the club. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah dancing with Jack, her laughter ringing in my ears, her body moving in ways I couldn't ignore. The touch, the chemistry, it was undeniable. And the worst part? She hadn't just danced with him. She'd let him into her space in a way that no one else had, not even me. By Friday, I had reached my breaking point. I had given Sarah space, hoping that she would come to terms with her actions and take responsibility. But instead, she seemed to be hiding behind excuses, as if avoiding the truth would make it disappear. Her denial had become as suffocating as the silence in our house. It was almost dinner time when I heard the front door open. I glanced over at the clock. It was already 6:30. Sarah had been out all day, running errands she'd claimed were important, but I hadn't seen her much since the conversation that morning. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine, trying to occupy my mind with something other than the anger that had been steadily building up inside me. When Sarah walked in, she looked different. Her face was flushed like she had been running, but there was no hint of that typical post-exercise glow. Instead, she looked frazzled, as if she were barely holding herself together. "David, we need to talk," she said immediately, her voice strained. She wasn't asking. It was a demand, a final attempt to settle things before they spiraled further. I stood up, my hands instinctively balling into fists. This was it. I knew it had to happen, but I had no idea how to start. The words I needed to say felt lodged in my throat, unwilling to come out. "You want to talk?" I said, my voice controlled but laced with anger. "You've had every opportunity to talk, Sarah. You had days to face what you did, but instead, you've avoided it. You've hidden from it. And now, you want me to just accept your excuses." She winced, but quickly recovered. "I don't know what you wanted to say, David. I know I messed up, but I need you to understand that it wasn't about you. It was about me. I've been feeling so trapped in this life, in this routine, and I just wanted something, anything, to feel free again." "Trapped?" I interrupted, my voice rising now. "You were trapped? So, you decided to go out and find freedom in the arms of another man. You let him touch you. You let him into your space. What part of that was about you needing freedom? What about us? What about our marriage?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She clenched her jaw, the defensiveness in her posture a wall between us. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that," she said, her voice shaky. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just trying to feel good about myself again." "Good about yourself?" I shook my head, my anger flaring. "You're telling me that betraying my trust made you feel good? Do you hear yourself, Sarah? You're trying to justify what happened like it's some kind of midlife crisis. It's not. You hurt me. You hurt us. And now you expect me to just accept it, to move on as if nothing happened." She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off, stepping closer to her. "No, Sarah, I'm done with the excuses. I've been listening to you for days, watching you try to make this my fault, telling me I'm overreacting, telling me I'm controlling. But the truth is you made a choice that changed everything." I could see the realization dawning in her eyes, but it was too late. The wall between us had already been built brick by brick, with every excuse, every half-hearted apology, and every attempt to deflect responsibility. "David, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I really am, but I don't know how to fix this." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah. I don't know if I can forget this. And right now, I don't think I want to." Her face fell, and the tears she had been holding back finally began to fall, silent and fast. But they didn't move me anymore. Not when I'd spent the last week drowning in my own pain, wondering if the woman I had loved for so long even existed anymore. I turned away from her, my heart heavy but resolute. "I need space, Sarah. I need time to figure out what's next. I can't keep doing this with you, not like this." I didn't wait for her response. I couldn't. I walked out of the room, the sound of her sobs following me down the hallway, but I couldn't find it in myself to care anymore. The damage was done, and I was no longer sure if there was a way back.